Last man down, hatches are shut.
Life on a U.S. Navy attack submarine breaks every rule of how human beings are supposed to live. 135 sailors share just 94 coffin-sized beds, breathe oxygen made from seawater, and whisper through corridors where a single dropped wrench could expose the entire submarine. The toilet requires actual training, and a German submarine once sank because the captain flushed it wrong. Some nights they fall asleep beside live torpedoes. Other days they go months without seeing sunlight or hearing their families' voices. And the people who do it would not trade it for anything, because this job gives them moments no other job on Earth ever could. This is what it is really like. The USS Missouri is a Virginia-class attack submarine, 377 feet long. Sounds big until you realize that roughly a third of that length is nuclear reactor and propulsion machinery. The crew does not go back there unless they work in engineering. That leaves 2/3 of a submarine, maybe 250 feet, for 135 human beings to live, work, eat, sleep, and maintain their sanity for months at a time. The first thing you notice is the bunks, or rather, the lack of them. Virginia-class submarines have 94 beds for 135 crew members. The Navy calls the solution hot racking, and the name is literal. 3 sailors share 2 bunks on rotating shifts. When submariners climb into their rack to sleep, the sheets are still warm from the body that just left. The mattress carries the impression of someone else's weight. They lie in a space roughly the size of a coffin, narrow enough that their shoulders brush both sides, short enough that taller sailors sleep with their knees bent, separated from the corridor by nothing but a thin curtain. That curtain is their bedroom door. A submariner's only personal space on the entire boat. Their belongings fit in a single locker smaller than a carry-on suitcase. Everything they own for the next 3 months lives in that box. Uniforms, toiletries, a few personal items, maybe a book or a photo. If it does not fit, it does not come. The 18-hour cycle controls everything. 6 hours on watch, operating sonar, monitoring the reactor, running navigation, maintaining weapon systems. 6 hours of ship's work, maintenance, training, drills, qualifications. 6 hours of rest, which sounds generous until you subtract eating, showering, personal time, and the fact that your body has no idea what time it is because there is no sun, no sky, and no window anywhere on the boat. Studies show submariners average about 6.5 hours of actual sleep per day. Your body never fully adjusts. You exist in a permanent state of managed exhaustion for the entire deployment, and the spaces they live in serve double and triple duty because there is simply nowhere else to put things. The officer's wardroom, the small room where senior officers eat, doubles as the operating room if someone needs emergency surgery. The torpedo room, where live Tomahawk missiles and Mark 48 torpedoes are stored, doubles as the gym. Sailors do bench presses and pull-ups between weapons that could sink a destroyer. On some boats, when the crew exceeds bunk capacity, sailors sleep in the torpedo room on cots laid between the racks of ordnance. You fall asleep 3 feet from a weapon designed to snap a ship in half. That is normal on an attack submarine. Every surface serves a purpose. The passageways are narrow enough that 2 people cannot walk side by side. When someone passes you, one of you turns sideways. The entire boat operates on an unspoken choreography, everyone moving through the same tight corridors without crashing into each other, without losing their temper. For months, in a sealed steel tube that never sees daylight. A carrier sailor complains about sharing a room with 5 people. A submariner would call that a luxury hotel. Here is something that will sit in your brain once you hear it. Every breath submariner take on a submarine was manufactured. The air inside the boat is not pumped in from outside. There is no outside. There is 300 feet of ocean above submariner and the hull is sealed. The oxygen they are inhaling right now was made by a machine that runs an electrical current through seawater, splitting it into hydrogen and oxygen. The oxygen gets pumped into the boat. The hydrogen gets vented overboard. Everyone on the submarine is breathing air that was ocean water an hour ago. But making oxygen is only half the problem. Every one of those 135 people is also exhaling carbon dioxide with every breath. In an open room, that does not matter. In a sealed steel tube 400 feet underwater, it will kill you. CO2 concentrations above 5% cause convulsions and death. So the submarine runs chemical scrubbers constantly. Machines that pass the air through a chemical called monoethanolamine that traps the carbon dioxide and strips it out. The cleaned air gets recirculated. The trapped CO2 gets heated, compressed, and discharged overboard. The cycle never stops. If it does, the crew has hours, not days, before the air becomes toxic. And then there is the smell. Every submariner knows it. Nobody outside a submarine has ever smelled anything like it. The monoethanolamine in the scrubbers has a distinct odor, sweet, chemical, musty that soaks into everything. After 24 hours aboard, their brain tunes it out completely. They cannot smell it anymore. When they come home after a 3-month deployment, open their duffel bag in the hallway, and the amine smell fills their entire house. That smell is the invisible signature of submarine life. The air is also thick with whatever else every sailor's bodies produce in a sealed environment. Body heat, sweat, cooking oil from the galley, lubricant from machinery, trace gases from equipment. The atmospheric monitoring system tracks all of it because at depth, even a small imbalance in the air composition can impair judgment, slow reaction time, or worse. Submariners work in CO2 levels that would trigger ventilation alarms in any office building on land. Down here, it is just Tuesday. Smoking was banned on all U.S. Navy submarines in 2010, not for health campaigns, but because in a sealed environment, cigarette smoke is a contaminant that the scrubbers have to fight on top of everything else. Secondhand smoke at depth is not a lifestyle choice, it is a threat to the entire crew's air supply. Vaping is banned for the same reason. There is a question that every civilian wants to ask a submariner but is usually too polite to say out loud. How do you go to the bathroom 400 feet underwater? The answer is on a submarine, the toilet does not flush into a sewer. It flushes into a pressurized holding tank called a sand tank sitting directly below the bowl. Sailors open a seawater valve to fill the bowl, do their business, pull a lever to open a ball valve at the bottom, and let gravity drag everything down. Close the ball valve. Close the water valve. Leave an inch of water in the bowl to form a seal. Simple enough until the sand tank needs to be emptied. Every couple of days, the tank gets pressurized with 400 pounds of compressed air and the contents get blown overboard into the ocean. When that is happening, warning signs go up throughout the boat. Do not touch anything connected to the sanitary system. Because if someone ignores the sign, or if someone is new and does not understand what the sign means, the pressurized tank pushes back hard. A fountain of seawater and sewage erupts through the toilet, through the showers, and through every drain connected to the system. On one boat, a sailor pressurized the sand tank and blew the contents back into the showers and the ice machine. Nobody used that ice machine for the rest of the patrol. On modern Virginia-class submarines, vacuum toilets solved most of these problems, but on older boats, and the Navy still operates plenty of them, the bathroom remains one of the most unforgiving systems on board. Not because it is complicated, because at depth, under pressure, with 135 people sharing a handful of toilets on staggered shifts, the margin for error is exactly zero. And if anyone thinks a toilet mistake on a submarine cannot possibly be that serious, look up the U-1206. On April 14, 1945, a German Type 7C submarine was cruising 200 feet beneath the North Sea off the coast of Scotland. The captain needed to use the head. German U-boats at that time had high-pressure toilets that could flush at depth, cutting-edge technology that eliminated the need to surface for waste disposal. The system worked through a series of pressurized chambers and valves that had to be operated in an exact sequence. It was so complicated that every submarine carried a trained toilet specialist. The captain decided he could figure it out himself. He could not. When he called the specialist for help, the specialist misunderstood the situation and opened the wrong valve. Seawater and sewage flooded the compartment and poured down onto the battery bank directly below. The salt water hit the battery acid and produced chlorine gas, the same gas used as a weapon in World War I. Toxic fumes filled the submarine. The captain had no choice but to surface. British aircraft spotted them immediately. Under attack and unable to dive, the captain scuttled the boat. 4 crew members died. 37 were captured. The only submarine in naval history sunk by its own toilet. Modern American submarines do not have this problem, but every submariner who hears the U-1206 story for the first time during training walks away with the same thought: on a submarine, there is no such thing as a small mistake, not even in the bathroom. Could you survive 3 months on a submarine? Be honest, tell me in the comments. Now, a submarine's greatest weapon is not a torpedo. It is silence. The entire point of an attack submarine is to exist in a place where nobody knows it exists. The ocean is dark and the submarine is darker, a black steel shadow gliding through water so deep that sunlight gave up reaching it hundreds of feet ago. The only way anyone finds a submarine is by listening, and the only way a submarine stays alive is by making sure there is nothing to hear. This is where life on board changes from uncomfortable to intense. During quiet operations, the entire boat goes into a mode that submariners call ultra quiet. Every non-essential system gets dialed down or shut off. The crew stops wearing boots, soft-soled shoes only. Conversations drop to whispers. Doors do not close, they get eased shut with both hands. Dropped tools are treated like emergencies. A wrench hitting the deck plate sends a sound wave through the hole and into the water where enemy sonar operators are listening for exactly that kind of mistake. Working out shifts from weights and resistance bands to yoga and stretching, anything that eliminates impact noise. The galley cooks meals that require less banging of pots and pans. Even walking changes. Sailors learn to roll their feet heel to toe instead of stepping flat, because a flat footfall carries further through steel than a soft roll. They are holding their breath inside a machine that is holding its breath inside an ocean. Meanwhile, the submarine's own sonar operators are doing the opposite, listening to everything. The sonar suite on a Virginia-class boat can pick up sounds from miles away, whale calls, distant ship engines, the faint hum of another submarine's cooling pump. Sonar operators train for years to distinguish between natural ocean sounds and man-made ones. They can tell the difference between a shrimp clicking and a torpedo tube flooding. In this world, ears are more valuable than eyes, and the sailors wearing headphones in the sonar room are the reason the boat stays hidden, and the reason enemy boats do not. Now, here is what the submarine is actually doing while all this silence is happening. Searching. A Virginia-class attack submarine tracks enemy ships and submarines for hundreds, sometimes thousands, of miles without the target having any idea it is being followed. It maps coastlines. It photographs ports through its periscope. It plants itself outside enemy harbors and records every vessel that enters or leaves. When the order comes, it launches Tomahawk cruise missiles that strike targets over 1,000 miles inland. Or it surfaces just long enough to put Navy SEALs into inflatable boats that disappear toward a hostile shoreline in the dark. Then it dives again, gone. No evidence it was ever there. The USS Missouri, a Virginia-class boat, spent 163 out of 181 days fully submerged during its last deployment. That is nearly 6 months underwater. 6 months of manufactured air, hot racks, recycled water, and silence. And every second of it depends on a crew that understands one rule above all others. Down here, sound is the enemy. One careless noise in the wrong moment does not earn a lecture. It earns a funeral. On an aircraft carrier, sailors complain about slow Wi-Fi. Whereas on a submarine, there is no Wi-Fi. There is no video chat with the kids before bedtime. There is nothing. When a submarine dives, it disconnects from the world entirely. Radio waves do not penetrate deep water. Cell signals die at the surface. The only way to send or receive any communication is to rise to a shallow depth and extend an antenna, a maneuver that risks exposing the boat's position. So it happens rarely, sometimes once a week, sometimes less. And when it does happen, the window is short. A burst of compressed data goes out, emails stripped of attachments, no photos or video, just plain text squeezed into the smallest possible transmission. Then the antenna retracts. The boat drops back into the deep, and silence returns. Imagine not knowing if your wife had the baby, not knowing if your kid took their first steps for weeks, sometimes months. The crew calls it the information desert, a stretch of time where the outside world simply stops existing. Life happens up there. Down here, the mission is the only reality. The Navy tries. When a family emergency is critical enough, a death, a birth, a crisis, a message called a family-gram gets transmitted through the chain of command. But it arrives as a short block of text. No way to call back and ask questions. A sailor finds out his grandmother died through a few typed sentences on a printout. He reads it in a corridor. He goes back to watch. There is nowhere private to grieve on a submarine. This is why port calls feel like oxygen to the crew. When the boat surfaces in a foreign port, maybe once or twice during a deployment, sailors sprint for cell signal the way a drowning person reaches for air. Phone calls home that last minutes feel like hours. Faces on a screen that they have not seen in weeks bring grown men to silence. Then the boat dives again and the world disappears. Between port calls, the boat needs supplies. Resupply at sea is its own kind of operation. Helicopters fly to a rendezvous point and lower packages to the partially surfaced submarine. The crew scrambles topside to grab the cargo before the boat is exposed for too long. For heavier loads, C-17 cargo aircraft fly overhead and drop waterproof packages directly into the ocean. A small team launches an inflatable boat, motors out to collect the floating supplies and hauls them back. Food, medical supplies, spare parts, maybe mail, letters from home sealed in waterproof bags that get passed around the mess hall like treasure. In the Arctic, resupply gets even harder. The submarine punches through the ice pack with its reinforced sail, the only part of the boat visible above the frozen surface. Crew members climb topside into sub-zero temperatures and hack through ice, covering the hatches with chainsaws and picks just to open an access point. Supplies get exchanged in minutes because nobody wants to be standing on Arctic ice any longer than absolutely necessary. Then, the hatches seal. The boat drops beneath the ice, and the world vanishes again. Every submariner who has done a full deployment knows the same feeling. The moment the boat surfaces for the last time and they see actual sunlight for the first time in months, not through a screen, real light hitting their face. Some say it is the most overwhelming moment of the entire deployment, not because of what they went through, because of how much the world kept moving without them and they had no idea. Suppose you ask any sailor in the entire United States Navy where the best food is. The answer is always the same. Submarines, not the carriers with their massive galleys and thousands of meals per day. The best cooks in the Navy get assigned to submarines, and there is a very specific reason for that. On a carrier, a sailor having a bad day can walk to the gym, step onto the flight deck and feel the wind, watch a sunset from Vulture's Row. On a submarine, None of that exists. The only thing the Navy can give these sailors that feels even remotely like comfort is a good meal, so they make sure the meals are exceptional. Submarine galleys serve 4 meals a day: breakfast, lunch, dinner, and midrats, the midnight meal for sailors coming off or heading to the late watch. The culinary specialists on board are not cooking for a cafeteria. They are cooking for sanity. Steak nights, lobster tails on special occasions, fresh bread baked on board, burger day which the crew treats like a holiday, chocolate chip cookies that disappear before they cool down. On one boat, the crew voted Burger Day the single best moment of the entire deployment. The mess hall is the social center of the submarine. It seats maybe 20 people at a time in a space the size of a large living room. This is where cribbage tournaments run for weeks, the oldest submarine tradition, so deeply embedded in the culture that some boats keep running scoreboards for the entire deployment. This is where sailors play cards, argue about sports, and stay away from the people they do not want to be around. Because on a boat this small, choosing who you sit with at dinner is one of the few choices you actually get to make. Then there are the freedoms that exist nowhere else in the Navy. Submariners are allowed to grow beards. Not long, regulation length, but on a boat where personal identity shrinks to a bunk curtain and a locker the size of a shoebox, facial hair is an act of individuality that matters more than it should. On the USS Missouri, the crew ran a contest called the Mighty Mo, who could grow the best mohawk during the patrol. Haircuts that will get you written up on any surface ship become badges of pride under the ocean. Small rebellions against a world that controls every other aspect of existence. Food, movies, cards, a beard, a mohawk contest. These sound like nothing. On a submarine, they are everything. They are the difference between a crew that holds together for 3 months and one that cracks. The Navy figured out a long time ago that submarines do not break because of mechanical failure. They break because human beings were not built to live like this. So the food is the best in the fleet. The cooks are the most important people on the boat, and Burger Day is treated with more reverence than most national holidays. Because when the ocean has taken away sunlight, privacy, space, fresh air, phone calls, and freedom, a perfect cheeseburger is the last thing standing between a sailor and the edge. Hit like for every submariner who made it through on Burger Day in cribbage. So there is a place on Earth where submarines go that makes everything else about this job feel normal. The Arctic. Nuclear attack submarines have been operating beneath the polar ice cap since the USS Nautilus made the first submerged transit of the North Pole in 1958. But operating there and surviving there are two different conversations. The Arctic is not just cold water. It is a ceiling, a frozen roof that stretches for hundreds of miles in every direction, sealing the submarine underneath with no guarantee of a way out. On a normal deployment, if something goes catastrophically wrong, the boat surfaces. In the Arctic, surfacing means finding a spot where the ice is thin enough to break through and hoping that spot exists anywhere nearby. The Navy trains for this constantly. Exercises called ICEX bring attack submarines into Arctic waters to practice the one skill that separates a successful polar mission from a burial at sea: ice surfacing. The submarine sonar maps the ice overhead, measuring thickness, searching for polynyas, natural openings in the ice, or thin patches where the sail can punch through. The sail on a Virginia-class boat is reinforced specifically for this. Hardened steel designed to crack through ice that would crush a normal structure. When the right spot is found, the submarine rises slowly. The sail hits the ice and keeps pushing. The noise is enormous, cracking, grinding, groaning, like the earth splitting open in reverse. The boat forces itself upward until just the sail tower breaks through the surface. From above, it looks surreal. A black steel fin sticking out of an endless white frozen wasteland with nothing else visible in any direction. No sign that a 377-foot war machine is sitting right below. Then the real work starts. The hatches are frozen shut. Crew members climb up through the sail into temperatures that can hit 40 below zero and start hacking through ice with chainsaws, picks, and axes. They are cutting their way out of their own submarine, standing on top of the Arctic ice pack in the most isolated place on Earth. Every minute topside is a minute exposed to conditions that can cause frostbite in under 10 minutes. Supplies get exchanged fast. Equipment gets checked. Scientific instruments get deployed. Then the hatches seal, the ballast tanks flood, and the submarine drops back beneath the ice into the silent black water underneath. Why does any of this matter? Because the Arctic is no longer just a frozen wasteland. It is the next strategic frontier. As ice melts and new shipping lanes open, Russia, China, and the United States are all racing to control the waters beneath the pole. Russian submarines already patrol the Arctic regularly. China has declared itself a near-Arctic state and is investing billions in polar capabilities. The shortest missile path between Russia and America passes directly over the North Pole. Whoever controls the water under that ice controls a strategic corridor that most people do not even know exists. American attack submarines have been operating there for decades, longer than anyone else. They know the ice, they know the currents, they know the sounds, and they do it in the same conditions their crew endures everywhere else. Hot racks, recycled air, manufactured oxygen, 4 meals a day, and a curtain for a bedroom door. Except now the ceiling is frozen solid and the nearest help is 1,000 miles away. The Arctic does not care how tough a submariner thinks they are. It just adds another layer of impossible to a job that was already impossible and expects them to do it quietly. Every sailor who steps onto a submarine for the first time gets a name. Not their real name. The crew does not care about that yet. They are called a NUB, non-useful body. Some boats call them pukes. It is a statement of fact. Until a sailor earns their qualification, they are dead weight on a vessel where dead weight can get people killed. The qualification process is unlike anything else in the military. It does not matter what job a sailor was trained for. A cook has to learn the torpedo systems. A sonar technician has to understand the nuclear reactor. A weapons specialist has to know navigation. Every sailor must learn every major system on the entire submarine, how it works, where it is, what happens when it fails, and what to do about it. Not a classroom overview. A working knowledge deep enough that if something breaks at 3 in the morning and the expert is asleep, someone else can keep the boat alive until they get there. The testing never stops. Qualified submariners quiz NUBs at random, in the corridor, in the mess hall, in the middle of a meal. What is behind that valve? Where does that pipe go? If this system fails, what is the backup? Get it right, move on. Get it wrong, study more. The veterans are not being cruel. They are making sure that the person sleeping 3 feet from them in a steel tube 400 feet underwater knows enough to save their life. Sailors get a limited number of patrols to qualify. The timeline varies by boat and by rate, but the message is the same. Earn your Dolphins or leave the submarine service. There is no extension, no second chance. The community does not carry passengers. Either a sailor proves they belong, or they go back to the surface fleet and never come back. Then comes the moment every submariner remembers for the rest of their life: the qualification board. Senior enlisted and officers firing questions from every department: weapons, engineering, navigation, damage control, reactor operations. The sailor answers them all, and when they pass, the Dolphin insignia gets pinned to their chest. 2 dolphins flanking a submarine bow, the badge that says this person knows the boat. This person can be trusted with the lives of everyone aboard. This person is no longer a NUB. They are a submariner. Veterans describe that moment differently. Some say relief. Some say pride. Some say it was the single hardest thing they have ever accomplished, harder than anything they will do for the rest of their career. Because earning Dolphins is not about passing a test. It is about proving to 134 people that you deserve to breathe the same recycled air they breathe. There is a formula submariners use to survive the months underground. They call it the happiness factor. Take the number of days of leave approved and divide it by the number of days left on the mission. When that number crosses above 1.0, the deployment has been mathematically beaten. The suffering is now officially shorter than the freedom waiting on the other side. Sailors track it obsessively. They do the math in their rack at night. They recalculate after every mission extension. It is not a joke. It is a survival mechanism dressed up as arithmetic. And maybe that is the truest thing about submarine life. It is not about the technology, not about the torpedoes or the sonar or the nuclear reactor. It is about human beings choosing to do something that human beings were never designed to do. Live inside a machine, underwater, in silence, in the dark, for months, and coming out the other side bonded to each other in a way that no one on the surface will ever fully understand. There are no passengers on a submarine. Everyone earns their place. Everyone carries the weight. And when the boat finally surfaces for the last time and real sunlight hits their faces, every single one of them knows they survived it together. Subscribe if you respect what these sailors do.